You know that feeling, right? That little clench in your chest when something bad happens to someone you really care about.
Oh, absolutely. It's very human.
Yeah. But have you ever stopped and wondered why? Why you feel that pang for some people, but maybe, well, not so much for others?
That is such a core question. And actually, it gets right to the heart of what we're exploring in this deep dive.
It does.
We're looking at a really foundational Buddhist text today, the Bhadraka Sutta.
Exactly. And this isn't just, some dry historical document. It's basically a transcript of a conversation
Mm-hmm.
between the Buddha and this village headman, Bhadraka Gamini.
And Bhadraka went to the Buddha with, well, huge question,
Pretty
really.
big one.
Yeah. Where does suffering actually come from? And maybe more importantly, how does it end?
What's so interesting, though, is the Buddha's way of tackling it.
Right. Our sources really highlight this. He wasn't about getting lost in, like, abstract ideas about past lives or what happens later.
No.
His focus was squarely on the present. Right here, right now. How does suffering pop up and how can we make it stop in our actual experience?
And that's the journey we're kind of taking you on this deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to follow the Buddha's method,
Guiding Bhadraka.
guiding him with these really insightful questions. And the hope is, by following along, you might have some of those aha moments yourself.
A fresh perspective, maybe.
Yeah, a new angle on your own feelings, your own emotional world. Our mission here is really to give you a solid handle on this core understanding of suffering. So, okay, let's dive in.
All right, so the Buddha kicks things off by making it super relevant to Bhadraka. He asks about his village, Uruelakapa.
His home turf.
Exactly. And he asks specifically, are there people there? If something bad happened to them, they got hurt, arrested, maybe even died, would that cause you, Bhadraka, worry and sadness?
And Bhadraka says yes.
Right.
Pretty naturally. You can point to people where, yeah, he'd definitely feel that.
Absolutely. But then the Buddha draws this really important distinction. He asks, okay, but are there other people in that same village whose suffering, whose misfortune wouldn't really trouble you?
And Bhadraka admits that too,
Mm.
which, again, feels very honest, very real.
It does. And that contrast, that's the setup. It's the starting point for digging deeper into the Buddha's teaching here.
It really is,
Mm.
because it leads straight to the crucial question, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
The Buddha just asks him, plain and simple, why? Why do you feel pain when bad things happen to some people you know but not others?
It seems so obvious when you put it like that, but yeah, how often do we actually stop and ask ourselves that?
Right, we just feel it.
Exactly. And Padraka's answer is, well, it's quite profound. He says, basically, it's because of the desire, the love, the bonds I have with those specific people.
Wow. So right away, this connection is made.
Yeah, this initial realization that it's our connections, the ties we feel, that are somehow linked to our potential for pain.
It's like those bonds are the channels almost.
That's a good way to put it. Channels for suffering to kind of flow into our experience.
And to make it even clearer, Bhadraka gives a personal example.
Yeah, he talks about his son.
Chirawasi, who lived somewhere else, right?
Right, another town. And Bhadraka mentions sending messengers, checking up on him, clearly showing how much he cared about his son's well-being.
That makes sense. A parent's concern.
Totally. And connecting this back to the main point, the Buddha then asks him very directly, would you be sad? Would you feel sorrow if something terrible happened to Chirawasi?
And Bhadraka's answer is emphatic, isn't it? Like, yes, of course, absolutely.
It really underscores that emotional investment.
And this is where the Buddha's skill really comes through, I think. He takes this deeply personal thing, Bhadraka's love for his son,
Yeah.
and uses that to show how suffering arises right now, in the present, because of that attachment, that love.
It's not just some theory.
No, it's grounded in Bhadraka's actual real feelings. It makes you think, doesn't it, about your own Chirawasis, the people you feel that strongly about.
And what's interesting is how quickly Bhadraka seems to grasp the wider implication.
He gets it.
Yeah, he realizes this isn't just about his son or those specific villagers. He sees that this principle, desire, love, leading to potential suffering, it applies much more broadly.
Across time, even.
Yes, he recognizes it applies to the past, the present, and the future, too. It's a general pattern.
Which then allows the Buddha to name the root cause more explicitly.
Exactly. He explains that this pain, this sorrow we feel when loved ones suffer or are lost, it stems from craving.
Which in Pali is tanha.
Kanha, right? And this, the Buddha states, is the fundamental origin of suffering, dukkha.
Do we?
For everyone. It's presented as a universal principle, just as true now as it was back then.
And it's crucial to see, isn't it, that while Bhadraka starts by thinking about specific people,
Yes,
the Buddha's pointing at something, well, deeper.
definitely. It's not just who we love or desire, it's the nature of the attachment itself. That clinging quality, that desire for things or people to be permanent, to stay as they are. That's what sets us up for suffering.
Okay, so to drive this home even more,
Yeah,
the Buddha uses another example, very relatable, his wife.
right. He asks Bhadraka, what about your wife? If something bad happened to her, would you be sad?
And Bhadraka confirms again, right? Deeply saddened, as if it happened to himself, he says.
Very strong bond, clearly. But then comes this clever twist in the questioning.
Okay.
The Buddha asks, did you know your wife before you were married?
And Bhadraka says, no, which would be typical.
Right. And then the Buddha poses this really interesting hypothetical, this counterfactual. He asks, okay, if something bad, something unfortunate had happened to her before you even met her, before you knew her, would you have felt worried then? Would you have been sad?
And Bhadraka's answer is just logical.
Completely. He says, no, my lord, not at all. I didn't know her then, so there was no desire, no connection, no reason for me to be sad.
It's such a clear way to show how attachment creates the potential for suffering, where there's no bond, no desire.
There's no associated pain from loss or harm related to that specific person. It really highlights how our emotional vulnerabilities are tied to the connections we form.
Because make you think about how these deep bonds form and how they define where we feel pain.
Exactly. And this all leads to the Buddha's really punchy conclusion for this part of the conversation.
Which is?
Simply, where there is desire, there is suffering. The origin of suffering has its roots in desire.
Direct. Concise.
Very, a central principle laid bare.
And the whole thing is revealed through this method, this back and forth questioning.
It really showcases the Buddha's teaching style, doesn't it? So effective.
Yeah, he doesn't just lecture. He guides Bhadraka, starting with his own, subjective experience.
Making it real, tangible.
Right, making him see the truth in his own life first.
And then, building on that personal insight, he gently steers Bhadraka towards a broader understanding.
More objective view.
Yeah, towards the Dhamma, the teaching itself. It's like moving from, this is how I feel, to, this is a general principle about how things are.
So it makes these potentially abstract concepts feel really accessible. Bhadraka gets these aha moments because it connects directly to him.
It's incredibly skillful.
So the ultimate aim here, as the sources suggest, is to help people like Bhadraka, like us maybe, move beyond just their limited everyday perspectives.
Step outside the usual push and pull of attachment and aversion.
And to gain a much deeper insight into reality, understanding where suffering comes from, and crucially, how it can cease.
Yeah, that cessation part is key.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up, bring it together. This deep dive into the Bhadraka Sutta, it really shines a light on a core insight, doesn't it?
It really does. That attachment, which is rooted in desire and love and these bonds we form, is presented as a fundamental cause of suffering.
Not just for Bhadraka way back then.
No, as a universal aspect of the human condition. And it's important to clarify, the point isn't saying love is bad.
Right, not at all.
It's about understanding how our clinging, that grasping aspect of attachment, can become the source of our pain when things inevitably change.
So circling back to that very first question we asked.
Yeah.
Why do we feel pain for some people and not others?
Well, this conversation between the Buddha and Bhadraka give a pretty clear answer, doesn't it?
It seems to.
It's the presence and maybe the intensity of our attachments. Those connections dictate where we feel that emotional resonance, that vulnerability.
The stronger the bond.
The deeper the potential pain when that bond is threatened or changed or broken.
So now that you've journeyed through this ancient wisdom with us, here's maybe something to reflect on.
Okay.
Consider this. What are the bonds in your own life? What are those desires, those attachments that really define your emotional world?
And maybe think about how understanding their nature, not necessarily getting rid of them, but understanding them might offer a new perspective.
Yeah, a different way to navigate the unavoidable ups and downs of just being human.
Perhaps just observing your own reactions, when things happen, when relationships shift, observing them in light of this teaching.
Food for thought, definitely.